During the family dinner, my daughter-in-law declared, "This shrew does not understand anything, she just signs and pays." When I confronted her, she threatened, "You will end up living on the street with the dogs." The very next day, every one of her cards was declined. "I am grateful to have you here. Stay with my story until the very end and leave a comment naming the city where you are watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled." I can still sense the heavy silence that descended on the dining table. My son David lowered his gaze to his plate, suddenly engrossed by his half-eaten steak. My grandchildren Emma and Tyler froze, forks suspended in mid-air. Even my sister Martha, who had come for our monthly family gathering, was stunned, her eyes shifting uneasily between me and Chloe. Chloe simply sat there, chin lifted, a victorious sparkle in her eyes, as if she had finally voiced what everyone was thinking. But in reality, none of them were thinking it. Nobody was. "Excuse me," I whispered faintly. "Oh, please do not pretend to be surprised, Claire," Chloe went on, swirling her glass of wine. "Everyone knows you are just David's checkbook. You sign anything we present and pay every bill we send your way." At last, David met her gaze. "Chloe, that is enough," he muttered, but his voice lacked strength or determination. In 35 years, my son had never confronted anyone. Not the bullies on the playground, not his demanding managers, and certainly not his wife of 15 years. "Is that so?" Chloe insisted. "She doesn't grasp our way of life or what we truly require. She simply throws money at every problem, because that is the only method she knows." I glanced around the table, a stunning mahogany piece I had bought for them as a gift when they moved into the house I had helped them purchase. The crystal goblets, once belonging to my mother, the silver candlesticks I presented for their 10th wedding anniversary. Everything in this home carries my touch. The funds I worked hard to earn were invested here. I told Chloe calmly, putting my napkin down, "I believe you have forgotten something important. This house where you feel so at ease insulting me is one I paid for." For a fleeting moment, Chloe's confidence wavered. Then her gaze turned sharp. "And you never let us forget it, do you? That is exactly what I mean. You believe your wealth entitles you to control us." "Mom," David interrupted weakly, "she does not mean it that way." But I refused to keep pretending. At 64, I had endured too many years swallowing my words, excusing my son's weakness and his wife's harshness. "I have never controlled anything, David. I have only helped when you requested, and you have asked often." Rising slowly, I declared, "I think I should leave." "Grandma, please don't go," Emma beseeched, her 12-year-old face clouded with confusion and worry. "It is all right, dear. We will speak again soon," I reassured her, though I was uncertain if Chloe would permit it. Gathering my purse and sweater, Chloe followed me to the door. I thought maybe she would. I wish she could understand just how deeply she had hurt me. Instead, she moved closer, her voice barely above a whisper so only I could hear. "If you ever try to turn my children against me or force David to choose between us, you will find yourself on the streets with the dogs. Remember who he will always pick." I said nothing. There was no reply to such raw hostility. Quietly, I left and walked to my car, my legs somehow steady even though my knees shook. That night, alone in the house I had spent 30 years paying off after Harold passed away, I sat at the kitchen table with cold tea. The check to renew David and Chloe's country club membership was still on the counter where I had placed it that morning, ready to mail. Alongside it lay the pile of credit card bills I regularly covered for them. Neiman Marcus, Saks, wine clubs, and golf gear. For 15 years, I had funded their lifestyle to keep David happy and give my grandchildren chances they would not otherwise have. I did not want them to experience the hardship I faced after becoming a widow at 32. But tonight, something inside me finally snapped, or maybe began to mend. I picked up the country club check and tore it apart. Then I called my bank. "I need to cancel several cards on my accounts and stop all automatic payments to those accounts," I told the representative. By morning, everything was settled. At exactly 9:17 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed Chloe's name. The screen suddenly lit up. "What on earth did you do?" she demanded when I responded. "My cards were just declined at Nordstrom. Here I am with 6 bags and no way to pay." "I just sign and pay, remember?" I answered calmly. "But now I have decided to stop doing that." Silence fell for a moment before Chloe unleashed a flood of threats and insults. I listened until her voice faded. "You have made your feelings about me abundantly clear, Chloe," I said finally. "Now I am making my feelings about you equally clear. Goodbye." I ended the call and blocked her number. Then I also blocked David's, at least for the time being. I needed space to think, to plan, to decide what came next. For the first time in many years, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. The burden of obligation lifted, replaced by a strange sense of lightness. I was no longer just a checkbook. I was Claire Wilson, and it was time to remember who that woman was. The morning after I severed Chloe's financial lifeline, I woke with a mix of emotions. Lighter because I had finally asserted myself. Heavier because I understood the consequences ahead. The aftermath would not be limited to angry phone calls. It would be an emotional battle. While making my morning coffee, memories flooded back. Memories of how I arrived at this point, of the steps leading up to yesterday's breaking moment. Harold passed away suddenly when I was 32, leaving me with a 7-year-old son and a mountain of unexpected debt. My husband had always been a dreamer, constantly pursuing the next major investment opportunity, yet he struggled to manage the resources we already possessed. Our life insurance only barely covered the funeral expenses and overdue mortgage payments. I vividly recall sitting at this very kitchen table, sorting through bills by candlelight because the electricity had been turned off. David had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching his father's sweater. That night, I made a promise to myself. My son would never experience the kind of financial uncertainty that now stole my sleep. The following morning, I pawned my engagement ring and invested the money in a real estate course. 6 months later, I sold my first house. Within 5 years, I had become one of the top-selling agents in Sacramento. By the time David started college, I owned my own brokerage. I provided David with everything: private education, summer camps, a new car when he turned 16, and full tuition at UCLA. Perhaps that was my initial mistake. David never had to work for anything and never built the resilience that arises from facing challenges. When he introduced Chloe to our home during his final year of high school, I was initially impressed. She was stunning, well-spoken, and appeared genuinely interested in my life story. She inquired about my business, praised our house, and spoke about her dreams to pursue a career in interior design. "She is the one, Mom," David had said, with eyes shining with a confidence I seldom witnessed in him. It gives me a sense that I can accomplish anything." They tied the knot a year after finishing school. I gifted them a generous down payment on their first condo as a wedding present. Chloe embraced me tightly during the celebration. "You are the mother I always wished for," she murmured. "I promise David will always treat you well." The first 2 years were fantastic. Chloe launched a small interior decorating business, and I directed my real estate clients her way. David started working in marketing, though he seemed to switch jobs often, always due to unpleasant workplace conditions or limited chances to advance. Then Chloe became pregnant with Emma. She closed her design firm, explaining she wanted to devote herself fully to being a mother. That marked the start of financial requests. At first they were small, then they grew larger. "It is just until David gets his next raise," Chloe would explain. Or they wanted to give Emma the same benefits David enjoyed as a child. I never said no. How could I? They were my family, my heritage. Besides, I possessed more money than I needed. Why else keep it if not for them? When Tyler arrived 3 years later, they needed a bigger home in a superior school district. I covered the down payment and co-signed the loan. "You are an angel, Claire," Chloe said the day they settled in, but something in her voice had changed. There was a sharpness, a quiet sense of entitlement that had not been there before. Slowly, the balance shifted. My dinner invitations slowed down. Whenever I came to visit, Chloe would highlight the things they supposedly needed to improve. These visits turned into mere exchanges. My presence was barely accepted as long as I provided financial backing. David never seemed to perceive the shift. If he did, he chose to ignore it. He grew more and more passive, always leaving decisions to Chloe regarding the children's education or which family gatherings they would attend. The Christmas when Emma was 7 made everything painfully clear. I arrived with thoughtfully selected presents: a telescope for Emma, who had shown a spark of interest in science, and a collection of illustrated adventure stories for Tyler. Chloe barely gave them a second look. She said they were trying to reduce the kids' focus on material things, even though Emma and Tyler were surrounded by a heap of costly toys already filling their playroom. That same evening, Chloe showed me pictures of a luxurious ski condo in Tahoe she wanted to buy. Its price was close to $500,000. She described it as an ideal spot for family holidays and a wise investment for the grandchildren's future. I signed the check 2 days later. We only spent one Christmas there before Chloe decided the mountains made them feel too cut off and sold the place. I never received a single dollar from that sale. That should have been the moment to wake up, but instead, I silently accepted the loss and kept supporting their extravagant way of living. From country club memberships and private school fees to high-end cars, everything had been managed. However, Chloe's attitude towards me became increasingly indifferent, while David's calls grew fewer. My visits with my grandchildren were limited more and more, always explained away by unclear excuses, such as scheduling conflicts or family commitments. Then, there was the request last month. Chloe wanted to redo their kitchen and master bathroom. The estimated cost exceeded $200,000 for imported Italian marble and made-to-order cabinets. She claimed it was a valuable investment in the property when I expressed hesitation for the first time. I agreed, but requested to be part of the planning process since real estate was my area of expertise. Chloe's expression turned chilly. "We would not want to trouble you with the specifics," she said, "only with the financing." That moment was the first crack in my mask of compliance. The remarks at dinner last night, the sharp comment, and the warning about living with dogs were just the final blows to a relationship that had been crumbling for years. As I poured myself a second cup of coffee, my phone lit up with messages from David. "Mom, what is happening? Chloe is upset. Please call me back. We need to talk." Then another. "Mom, the mortgage payment was due yesterday. Did you forget?" I set the phone aside without replying. For 15 years, I had been trying to secure David's independence. Instead, I had unknowingly bought his submission to Chloe and my own emotional isolation from the family I helped create. No longer. It is time for all of us to face a hard but essential lesson about the real price of financial control. Dependence had reached a peak. By midday, my phone had recorded 37 missed calls, 23 from Chloe and 14 from David. I muted it and set it face down on the kitchen counter. For the first time in numerous years, I chose my own calm over their pressing demands. When the doorbell chimed at 2 o'clock, I immediately recognized the visitor. I thought about ignoring it, but I was not someone who ran away from challenges. I had taken my stand, and now it was time to uphold it. David appeared on my porch, his shoulders slumped and his face etched with concern. In that instant, he bore a striking resemblance to Harold, sharing the same furrowed brow and the anxious gesture of raking his hand through his hair. "Mom," he said the moment I opened the door. "What's going on?" "Chloe is losing it. The credit cards are declined. The mortgage payment didn't go through, and she claimed you were incredibly cruel to her." I stepped aside to welcome him inside, but did not answer right away. In the living room, David paced restlessly like a captive animal. Is this about what she said at dinner? You know how Chloe behaves after a few glasses of wine. She did mean it, David. Every word, I responded, keeping my tone calm. It wasn't simply what was said at the meal. This tension had been simmering for years. He halted and looked at me intently. What do you mean? When was the last occasion you covered your own mortgage, your car payment, or your children's education fees? He blinked rapidly, his lips moving silently like a fish out of water. You said you wanted to assist. You said you had plenty to give. I truly wish to help, but there is a distinction between supporting and enabling. I have been enabling you and Chloe to live beyond your means while being treated like an ATM. That is unfair, he argued, but he avoided meeting my gaze. We value everything you do. Do you really? When Chloe called me a shrew at dinner, you stayed silent. When she threatened I would end up on the streets with dogs, your silence remained. Is that what you call appreciation, David? He collapsed onto my sofa, utterly deflated. What exactly do you expect me to do, Mom? Chloe is Chloe. You know how she behaves. If I challenge her, life becomes unbearable for days. My heart ached for him, but disappointment surged within me. The little boy I had raised to be resilient and self-reliant had turned into a man terrified of his own wife's temper. What I want is for you to stand on your own 2 feet, I told him. I want you to take accountability for your life and choices. I want you to remember that I am your mother, not your personal bank. So you are just cutting us off? Just like that? Panic edged his voice. The children have tuition payments due next month. The property taxes. You and Chloe earn nearly $200,000 yearly combined. I interrupted. That is more than enough for a comfortable life if you adjust your spending. You do not need 3 luxury vehicles. The children do not require designer outfits. You can live without a country club membership. His face darkened. So this is it. This is not a punishment, David. It is a boundary. I will forever be your mother, and my love for you and my grandchildren will never fade, but I refuse to support a way of life that involves disrespect and thanklessness. He suddenly rose to his feet. Chloe was right about you. You are using money as a means to control us. The accusation hurt deeply, yet I did not show it. If that is your belief, then I have failed as a mother in more ways than I ever knew. David left in anger without saying another word. I watched through the window as he drove away in the BMW I had gifted him for his 40th birthday. My heart felt crushed, but I stayed firm. This pain was essential for everyone involved. 3 days passed without any communication. On the 4th day, an email came from Chloe. The subject read simply, "Terms, Claire." It started with, "No dear," or any other polite greeting. "Your conduct has caused great distress to our family. Still, we are willing to proceed under certain conditions. All financial assistance will be restored immediately, including credit cards, mortgage payments, and the fund for the children's education. You must sign a legal document ensuring these payments will continue regardless of any personal conflicts. You will offer me an apology for your antagonistic behavior. In exchange, you may visit your grandchildren once a month, but only under our supervision. Please reply quickly. The children ask about you, and we want to avoid disappointing them. The grandmother has abandoned them. Regards, Chloe." I read the email several times, each time fueling my anger even more. The boldness of her demands and the barely disguised warning about my grandchildren was shocking in its sense of entitlement. I composed numerous replies in my mind, each sharper than the previous. Yet, in the end, I simply hit delete. Some messages simply do not merit a response. That evening, the doorbell rang again. When I opened it, my heart skipped a beat. Emma and Tyler were standing on my doorstep, backpacks hanging from their shoulders, their expressions serious. "Grandma," Emma said quietly but with resolve, "can we come in?" Dad dropped us off. He said he would return in 2 hours. I invited them inside, my thoughts spinning. Was this David trying to make contact, or was he manipulating my grandchildren for his own emotional advantage? "We missed you," Tyler said, hugging me tightly. At 8 years old, he was still openly loving. "I missed you too, sweetheart," I answered, holding back tears. Emma, always intuitive, looked at me firmly. "Mom said you won't come to visit anymore because you are angry with her." "It is complicated, Emma. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements over important matters," I responded cautiously. "Is it about money?" she asked. "Mom said Dad is being selfish with his money." The blunt honesty of children is both heartbreaking and revealing. "It is not only about money," I explained. "It is about respect and the freedom to make one's own choices." We spent the following hour baking cookies together and catching up on their school experiences. I carefully avoided bringing up Chloe or the situation at home, not wanting to place them in any awkward position. However, as they were preparing to leave, Emma quietly handed me a folded piece of paper. "Dad told me to give you this," she said softly. After they had gone, I unfolded the note with shaking hands. "Mom," it started in David's familiar handwriting. "Chloe doesn't know I brought the children to visit you. Things are complicated at home right now. I'm trying to see your side, but please do not punish the kids for the mistakes we made. They need their grandmother. David." I held the note close to my heart, tears finally streaming down my face. David had gone against Chloe to bring my grandchildren to see me. It was a small act of bravery, but possibly the start of something much bigger. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in many weeks. The future was still uncertain, yet for the very first time, I sensed a faint hope that I might not face this journey alone. 2 weeks slipped by without any news from David after his secretive visit with the children. I tried to keep the silence from overwhelming me, but my home felt emptier than ever. The quiet that used to soothe now seemed to highlight the void. On one especially lonely night, I found myself gazing at an old photo album filled with images of David as a young boy, cheek-toothed and carefree, his high school graduation, and his wedding day. With Chloe glowing and radiant, both of them gazing at me with sincere warmth, I wondered when everything had shifted. When did money start to outweigh love in our bond? My quiet thoughts were cut short by the doorbell. To my astonishment, Martha appeared at my doorway carrying a casserole and wearing a determined look. "You haven't answered my calls," she said as she stepped inside confidently. "I figured you'd be sitting here feeling sorry for yourself, so I brought some lasagna." Despite the tension, I found myself laughing. My sister had always been the straightforward one. "I'm not feeling sorry for myself," I muttered, "just thinking." "Same thing," she replied with a smirk as she moved toward the kitchen and began laying the table as if she owned the place. I told her everything: Chloe's harsh words, David's weakness, the financial control, and how I chose to cut ties. Martha smiled approvingly. "It's about time," she said. "I've watched that woman treat you like a cash machine for years." But then I confessed my greatest fear. What if I have lost them forever? What if David never returns the children? Martha reached out and gently squeezed my hand. "Then you create a life so rich and meaningful, they can't resist wanting to be part of it. Remember who you were before becoming just David's mother and Emma and Tyler's grandmother." Her words hit deeply. Who was I now? For so long, my identity was tied to my role in their lives. Without that, what did I have left? The next morning, I woke up with... A peculiar force seemed to flow through me. I created a list, though not of expenses or responsibilities, but of activities I once cherished before life's demands took over. Gardening, book groups, theatre plays, travelling, small steps to rediscover joy. That very afternoon, I drove to the nearby garden centre and purchased trays of marigolds, zinnias, and young tomato plants. My backyard had been ignored for many years. The flower areas were overrun by weeds, and the vegetable patch I used to adore had turned into a stubborn field of crabgrass. As I plunged my hands into the earth, pulling out weeds and readying the ground for fresh growth, I sensed something within me starting to mend. The labor was tough, muscles complaining after years of inactivity, yet the physical effort felt deeply cleansing. "That is quite an endeavor you have taken on." I glanced up, squinting under the sunlight, to find an elderly woman watching me over the fence that divided our yards. I faintly recognized her as the neighbor who had moved in around a year ago, even though we had only exchanged brief greetings before. "I am reclaiming old passions," I said, brushing sweat off my forehead. She returned a warm smile, her eyes crinkling with friendliness. "I'm Eleanor," she introduced herself. "I've been admiring your garden from a distance, but rarely see you outside." "Claire," I responded. "No, I have not been much of a gardener recently. Life got in the way." "Life tends to do that," she nodded knowingly. "Would you like some assistance? My back gives me trouble these days, but I'm quite skilled at overseeing others' work." I found myself laughing once more, the second time in just 2 days, after enduring weeks of loneliness and quiet. I really enjoyed that. Eleanor turned out to be a retired botany professor with an extensive knowledge of plants and a sharp, witty sense of humor. With her support, my garden began to blossom. During our pauses, she shared stories about her late partner of 4 decades, her travels around the globe, studying rare plants, and how she rebuilt her life after loss. She confided one afternoon, while we sat on my patio drinking iced tea, that the hardest part was not losing Sandra, but discovering who she was without her. They had been so inseparable, she had forgotten where Sandra ended and she began. I nodded, fully understanding. That is exactly how I feel about my identity as a mother. I spent so many years defining myself by what I could give to my son that I lost sight of who I was beyond that role. Eleanor looked at me thoughtfully and asked who I was finding myself to be now that I was searching. This question stayed with me long after she had left. Who was I beyond the parts I had played in life? The thought was both frightening and thrilling because I realized I still did not fully know. In the weeks that followed, I started to explore. I joined a book club at the local library. I enrolled in a watercolor painting class at the community center. I met for lunch with former colleagues from my real estate career, some I had not seen in many years. Gradually, my days began to fill with meaning, unrelated to past roles or obligations. Supporting David and Chloe was once the center of my life. My schedule, which used to revolve entirely around their events and the financial burdens they brought, gradually became filled with my own pursuits and commitments. Then, on a rainy Tuesday, exactly 5 weeks after I had ended financial assistance, my phone buzzed with David's number. "Mom," he said when I answered, his voice heavy with emotion, "we need to talk." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop located midway between our houses, a place neither of us could claim as territory. When I arrived, David was already seated, leaning over his cup, visibly worn out. The costly watch Chloe had insisted he needed was noticeably missing from his wrist. "You look well," he remarked with surprise as I took a seat. "I am well," I responded calmly. "Actually better than I have been in quite some time." He nodded, avoiding eye contact. "That's good. I am glad." I waited silently, sensing there was more he wanted to share. In the past, I might have rushed in to ease his burden by filling the quiet, but now I was learning the art of patience. "Things have been tough," he finally confessed. "Without your support, we have had to adjust a lot. Chloe is struggling with the changes." I replied evenly, "I can imagine." He continued, "We had to withdraw the children from private school. Chloe sold some of her jewelry, and I had to take a loan to handle the mortgage. It has been quite revealing." I took a steady sip of my coffee, encouraging him to go on. "Chloe wants me to ask you to rethink your decision," he said at last, looking me in the eye. "She even drafted another email with her demands, but I told her no. I told her, I would not pressure you any longer." My heart swelled with a surprising sense of pride. That must have been challenging. A faint smile appeared on his face. It was frightening, actually, but also freeing. He paused for a moment. I have been reflecting a lot on what you mentioned about enabling. You were right. I have allowed Chloe to control our way of life without owning up to it. I have been relying on your financial aid instead of standing independently. And now, I gently prompted, I am trying to change that. I have been searching for a better paying position. I am learning to refuse Chloe's more lavish requests. He ran his hand through his hair, a movement so reminiscent of his youth that it made my heart ache. It is not simple. She has already threatened to leave me twice. I am sorry, I said sincerely. Despite everything, I did not want my son to experience suffering. Do not worry, he answered with unexpected determination. This had to happen. We needed to confront the truth. He reached over the table and took my hand. Thank you, Mom, for having the bravery to do what I could not. As I drove home, tears blurred my sight. Not tears of sorrow, but of cautious hope. David was discovering his resilience, just as I was finding mine. The path ahead would be neither direct nor easy, but for the first time in many years, it felt like we were both moving toward the right place. Summer turned into autumn, and with the falling leaves came a slow change in my relationship. Spending time with David and the kids was becoming a new chapter in my life. Our coffee shop meeting had opened a pathway, and, although Chloe was noticeably missing from our reunion, David started bringing Emma and Tyler to visit me every alternate weekend. I treasured these moments, as they felt more sincere than any contact we had shared in recent years. Without the weight of financial matters hanging over us, David appeared more at ease, fully engaged in the present. The children, initially puzzled by the family strain, showed the incredible ability of young hearts to adjust quickly. One Saturday, while we were baking cookies, and Emma's fingers were sticky with dough, she asked, "Mum wants to know if you'll come to my piano recital." I stopped, taken aback by this subtle gesture of goodwill. Did she say that directly? Emma nodded without looking up, focused on forming her cookies into perfect rounds. She told me to share that I was welcome to attend if I wished. It was not exactly a warm invitation, but it was something. I would love to come, I said, and the smile that brightened her face made all the awkwardness in the world worthwhile. The recital was set in the community centre, where Emma now took her music lessons, a step down from the prestigious academy she had been part of before, yet her enthusiasm for performing had not diminished. I arrived well in advance and picked a seat near the back, uncertain of how I would be received. David recognized me immediately and approached, his face showing relief. "Thank you for coming, Mom. This means so much to Emma." "I would never miss it," I replied warmly. "Where is Chloe?" he replied, glancing back over his shoulder while saving seats at the front. "She is aware that you have arrived." The recital went pretty smoothly, with Emma delivering a stunning version of Debussy that moved me to tears. Later, as the children enjoyed cookies and punch, Chloe came straight to me for the first time since our disagreement. "Claire," she said in a deliberately calm voice, "thank you for being here." I responded with equal calmness, expressing my gratitude for the invitation. A tense silence lingered between us, filled with unresolved issues and the fragile beginning of a truce. "The children miss you," she finally admitted, as if offering a valuable peace offering. "I have missed them as well." Chloe adjusted her simple cotton skirt, a departure from her usual high-end clothing. She confessed that things have been difficult lately. I stayed quiet, eager to hear what she intended to say next. "David and I have talked about our situation," she went on, "and we believe we have found a way that would work well for everyone." There was something in her voice that made me cautious. "We are considering downsizing," she explained. "The house is just too big for us at this point, especially with the current mortgage rates. We thought perhaps you might think about moving in with us. You could sell your home, and together we could find a new place that would comfortably suit all of us. I stared at her in silence, unable to find words. After all that had transpired, this was the suggestion she put forward. I should sell my house and move in with them. It would benefit the children to have you nearby more often, she said, clearly taking my silence as a sign of consideration. Naturally, it would support us financially during this period of change. Ah, there it was, the true reason behind it all. That is quite a proposal, I responded cautiously. Have you and David gone over the plan? We have some ideas, she answered, a trace of her former self-assurance returning. Your home should easily fetch no less than $600,000 in this market. That would quickly clear our debts and provide a new beginning in a simpler residence. My house, my financial stability, my independence, all to rescue them yet again. Before I could reply, my phone vibrated with a text. I glanced down to find it was from Emma. Grandma, are you seriously moving in with us? Mom said you might. My heart clenched. They had already shared this with the kids, using their excitement as another form of leverage. I must congratulate Emma on her performance, I told Chloe, needing time to steady my thoughts. As I navigated through the crowd, I noticed David near the refreshment table. The expression he gave me, a mix of hope and shame, told me all I needed to know. This was not merely Chloe's idea, he was completely involved. That night I sat in my garden, watching fireflies flutter around the flowers Eleanor and I had planted. This garden had become my refuge, a place where I could breathe from the weight of decisions looming over me. A physical sign of my own growth and healing, the idea of leaving stirred an empty ache deep in my chest. You look burdened, Claire remarked as she joined me, carrying 2 glasses of wine. Our nightly talks had become a treasured habit. I shared with her Chloe's proposition, the clear financial incentive behind it, and how they had already captured the children's excitement. And what is it that you desire? Claire inquired after I finished. I confessed, I want to be present in my grandchildren's lives. I want to witness David continue evolving into the strong man he is destined to be. She questioned gently, but, I responded, but not if it means sacrificing my own well-being. I refuse to support the same harmful cycles we strive to overcome. Claire nodded with understanding. Then your choice is clear. The following day, I invited David over when it was just the 2 of us. He showed up appearing both hopeful and anxious, resembling a young man begging for his first set of car keys. Mum, before you react, I want you to know this was my choice. No financial gain expected, just family staying connected. Tears welled up in my eyes. This was exactly what I had longed for. Not to be valued for money, but to be cherished for who I truly am. I would love that, I replied. On Sunday, I arrived at their modest yet cozy apartment, bearing a homemade lasagna and a petite herb garden for their tiny balcony. The space was filled with warmth, family photographs, and colorful artwork created by the children. Chloe welcomed me with a bright smile. A sincere embrace, our first one in more than a year. Welcome, she said, and it genuinely felt that she meant those words. Dinner was straightforward, yet delightful. We shared laughter and stories, talking about hopes and aspirations for what lay ahead. There was no mention of money, status, or purchases. We simply existed together, cherishing the moment as it was. Later, while savoring dessert on their modest balcony, I observed Emma showing Tyler how to tend to the herbs I had brought. David and Chloe lingered nearby, his arm resting gently around her waist, both appearing more at ease than I had seen them in a long while. In that instant, I understood that the garden I had cared for so attentively was not the one in my backyard. It was this family, these bonds. I had removed the weeds of enablement and reliance, nurtured the ground with honest dialogue, and sowed seeds of respect and boundaries. At last, something wonderful was starting to grow. Months ago, Eleanor asked who I was beginning to become. Looking now at my family, healthier, more genuine, truly connecting, I found the answer. I was Claire Wilson, mother, grandmother, friend, gardener, creator of limits, and supporter of authentic growth. That identity was more than sufficient. Now, I wonder about you who hear my tale. What would your response be if placed in my position? Have you experienced something alike? Please share your thoughts below. Meanwhile, I am moving on to the final chapter. Here are 2 additional tales that have become popular on the channel, and they are sure to astonish you.